Hello and welcome to the What Mortgage Show. I'm Stephen Little. Home ownership in England is at its lowest in 30 years, with soaring deposits and house prices leaving many unable to get a foot on the property ladder. At the root of the problem is the severe shortage of housing. Experts believe we need to build 300,000 homes a year to tackle the gap between supply and demand. Today I'm speaking to Paul Broadhead from the Building Societies Association on whether a new wave of off-site construction could help solve the housing crisis. Paul, welcome to the programme. When people hear about off-site construction methods, they immediately think of prefabs, which are seen as being inferior to homes built from scratch. What is it that separates modern homes built off-site to the soulless prefabs associated with the post-war housing boom?
Well, you're absolutely right. People often do think prefab, this is flimsy, emergency post-war housing that was there for a purpose and was expected to have a pretty limited lifetime. Although it does have its fans, actually. Some people do still seek to buy those, but we're talking worlds apart, absolutely worlds apart. And off-site construction conjures up many things, but what I like to think of it as, actually, these things are precision engineered. And if you start talking about something as precision engineered, that sounds like a quality product. And the way we've built homes in this country over the hundreds and hundreds of years, you start to think to yourself, we haven't really moved on. And if you were to buy a new car, where would you rather that car was built? In a factory with quality control built in, or in a muddy field in the rain? And I think I know what most people would answer that question with.
Do you think there are problems with the perception of modern off-site construction methods?
Well, I think there does need to be a bit of a charm offensive and a bit of an education programme about what it is that we're actually talking about. And, off-site construction and modern methods, many of these methods of construction are not that modern. Timber frame is considered a modern method of construction. Well, we've been building homes out of timber for hundreds and hundreds of years. It's just now it's cross-laminated timber. So I think really what we're talking about here is anything that's not traditional. And by traditional, typically we think of brick and block construction in England and Wales as well. So we need to start to understand what that is. But many homes that are built in the traditional way already have elements of off-site construction in there. Many of the roof spaces are actually constructed off-site and bolted on the site as well. So we really need to start streamlining the terminology that we use, streamlining the system so people can start to understand what it is that we're talking about, and then can really start to understand what the benefits are.
What are the main challenges of adopting these methods?
Well, first of all is the range of systems and terminology, and there's a real challenge. It's almost kind of the chicken and the egg situation, because developers often have not built these types of homes in numbers because they're not quite sure whether the consumer demand is there or whether lenders will lend on them. Lenders haven't updated their processes en masse because, again, they don't know whether that supply is going to be there as well. So it needs a concerted effort by all parts. But let's be clear, what we're not talking about here is replacing the kind of homes that we have built today. We know we've got a private sector, the large house builders will have a certain capacity or desire to build the numbers that they do. I think they can continue to do that. What we're talking about here is an additional supply chain that increases consumer choice and actually increases the number of homes that are built each year.
Is land banking by developers also a problem?
Land banking by developers is really interesting. That's something that the government has really focused on, hasn't it? We've heard terms, certainly from Miliband when he was trying to be elected as Prime Minister, talking about having a penalty to you either use it or you lose it. But actually, I think we've got an awful lot of land. We've got more land in England that's given over to golf courses than we have to homes. So, we've got plenty of land. About the planning process, although it was streamlined a few years ago, the National Planning Policy Framework was streamlined, so that's still a challenge. But it's about making sure that we can get access to land, particularly for smaller developers as well, because that is a real challenge.
Is it difficult for borrowers to get finance for homes built off-site?
Yes, it can be. There are lenders out there that will lend upon it, but typically, again, because it's not considered mainstream, it tends to be dealt with by exception, on a case-by-case basis. So often where we've seen these modern methods utilised the most is in the self and custom build sector, where people have built their own homes or self-commissioned their own homes as well. And we've got 24 building societies that lend on that. So actually our sector's probably got a bit of a head start by understanding the performance of many of these buildings as well. But until we start to see the numbers coming through, then it's unlikely that the larger lenders will start to have a look at their processes to encompass that. That said, we could well be at a bit of a tipping point, because we've seen an awful lot of private investment now come into off-site construction and modular housing. We've seen Lang O'Rourke in the Midlands, we've seen Legal and General in Yorkshire, we've seen Stuart Mill in Scotland that are now starting to invest in factories to start developing either components or modular type homes as well. We've been working with them, taking building societies out to have a look at those facilities so that we can start to understand what kind of questions lenders will have, and of course consumers will have. Because often when you buy a house, if you've got the money, which is a big if, often somebody will want to knock a wall down and make a room bigger or put a conservatory on. If the home's built of modular construction, is that as straightforward? What does that do to the integrity of the property? So all of these questions need to be answered, and that's what we're starting to look at just at the moment. But actually, for those people that are buying these homes, there is lending available. You just need to look for it, so you'll need to make sure you take that advice.
Why are the bigger lenders so wary?
I think really, well, first of all, it's numbers. It's a numbers game, isn't it? So if you're investing in systems, you need to make sure that your investment is going to be utilised in order to get that throughput. And at the moment, we don't know the size of this market because it's really in its infancy. That doesn't mean to say that we should ignore it or rule out those large lenders. In exactly the same way the building society sector led the way on looking at the ageing population and raising age limits, and we've now seen the banking sector follow. I don't see why that can't happen again, because our sector, generally regionally based and all of that, can be more fleet of foot and lead the way in that, and actually start to overcome some of these mitigants and make sure they're in the market for the lenders to follow.
Yeah, I mean, how are we going to bring more lenders to the table? How are we going to get them interested in lending?
Well, I think first of all, there's a role for government here. The government has now published a white paper, which is great. Lots and lots of warm words about how they're going to accelerate building methods, utilising off-site construction as well. And one of the key aspects of that, and something that I've said to the government, is what you need is the government's got an enviable position of being able to bring together all different industries and get them round the table. And actually, that's exactly what they should be doing. They should start conversations with the lending community, the building community, the insurance community, the warranty providers, consumer groups as well, to understand what needs to happen to really accelerate this. Because, we are in the midst of a housing crisis. We're building nothing like the 300,000 homes a year, and I don't think off-site construction on its own can solve that, but it can certainly contribute additional properties in different areas as well. So it's certainly something that should be explored and examined and worked really hard on.
Why don't large house builders use these methods?
I think some of them do. Some of them do already. So some of those precision engineered roof trusses and all of that, they are starting to utilise as well. But typically, and actually one of the large house builders, because of things like staff shortages, material bottlenecks as well, are starting to examine this even more. What I don't think we should be saying, though, is that we expect all the large house builders to stop doing what they're doing and take this on, because that's not going to increase numbers. So actually I'm quite happy for the large house builders largely to continue to provide the kind of product that they do and have an additional supply stream as well, because that improves consumer choice and it improves the numbers of homes that are built each year.
Right. What countries in Europe should we be looking to for inspiration?
So Germany is very forward thinking, the Netherlands is very forward thinking, Austria as well, and I know there's been a few delegations from government, and I'm actually going to the Netherlands later this year with a group of chief executives of building societies to allow them to start having a look and speaking to lenders over there about how they've already overcome some of these challenges that we're talking about here today. So rather than us sit in our ivory tower in the UK, if you like, and try and reinvent the wheel, let's learn from our counterparts in Europe of their experience as well, and make sure that UK citizens can also get the benefit of that expertise.
I mean, what action does the government need to take now?
Well, there's a couple of things. First of all, governments don't typically build houses. However, the current government has said it is going to start directly commissioning homes to be built in some new towns, certainly the first one being over in Cambridgeshire. And I think actually if the government is so convinced that this is a really, really good thing to do, then let's start commissioning some of these homes built of this construction type on the government's watch. They've really got a prime opportunity to start getting some of this out there and will enable lenders to understand what the risks are. It will enable consumers to have a look and realise some of the benefits. That forget these properties can often cost 20% less per year to run. They're much more energy efficient as well. So actually that's not to be sniffed at with the way utility bills are. But I think it comes back again to housing supply. We've seen insufficient homes built for decades, governments not getting a grip of the real problem. We've seen a revolving door of housing ministers, and housing does not even have its own cabinet minister. So actually, if you look at the fragmented approach that government take, the Department for Communities look after homelessness and housing. The Department for Business looks after the construction industry. You've got the purse strings being held in the Treasury. You've got the biggest disposers of public land for redevelopment being in the health service and defence, and yet there isn't a cabinet level housing minister to draw all of this together. So it would really start, for me, get a housing minister in the cabinet office that can start to pull all these different fragmented departments together with a concerted effort as well. And I'm sure now all political parties recognise the need that we need more homes. We can actually get a cross-party consensus and get these things built.
Well, thank you very much for joining us, Paul.
Thank you, Steve.
And thank you for watching.